Hello everyone, my name is Siti Aziza Nurhalima Rais, and today I would like to present my sociolinguistic project. This presentation is divided into parts. In part 1, I will explain two sociolinguistic topics. Then in part 2, I will analyze several case studies using sociolinguistic concepts, theories, and journal finding. Now, let's begin with the first topic. The first topic is style, context, and register. These three concepts are closely related because they explain how language changes depending on the situations, the audience, and the purpose of communication. Understanding these concepts help us communicate more appropriately in different social situations. First, let's understand the definition. Style is the way people use language differently depending on who they are talking to and the purpose of communication. Context is the situation that help us understand the meaning of an expression. Meanwhile, register is a variety of a language used in a specific field such as education, business, medicine, or everyday conversation. Although they are different concepts, all three help us understand how language works in society. Now, let's discuss style. Style refers to the way people change their language depending on the person they are speaking to. For example, when talking to friends, people usually use informal expressions such as "What's up?" However, when talking to lecturers, they usually choose more polite expressions like "Good morning, professor." This example shows that people naturally adjust their language according to the social situation and the relationship between the speaker and the listener. Next is context. Context is important because the same word or sentence can have different meaning in different situations. For example, the expression like "this project is sick" may sound negative if we understand the word literally. However, among young people, the word sick often means something excellent or impressive. This example shows that understanding the context helps us avoiding misunderstandings and interpret language correctly. The next concept is register. Register is a variety of a language used in a particular profession or field. For example, doctors often use the word hypertension when talking to other medical professionals. However, when speaking to patients, they usually say high blood pressure because it is easier to understand. Although both expressions have the same meaning, the language changes depending on the audience. Now let's look at the theory related to this topic. According to Ronald Wardo, in an introduction to social linguistics, people change the way they use language depending on the social situation, the audience, and the purpose of communication. In other words, language is flexible and influenced by social relationship. This theory supports the idea that style, context, and register are important in everyday communication. Now, let's look at two real-life examples. The first example comes from real life. Like many companies use informal language such as like "Who's ready for the weekend?" because they want to create a friendly atmosphere and connect with a young audience. The second example is a university announcement that say students are required to submit their assignment before Friday. Unlike the first example, this sentence uses a formal register because it is intended for academic communication. This example showed that language changes according to the audience and the purpose of communication. Now let's compare these three concepts. Style focuses on how people speak depending on the listener. Context explains why the same language can have different meaning. Meanwhile, registers refers to the type of language used in a particular profession or situation. Although they have different functions, these three concepts work together to help people communicate effectively. To conclude, the first topic, style, context, and registers, play important roles in communication. Choosing to appropriate language based on the audience and the situations helps people communicate more clearly, politely, and effectively while reducing misunderstanding. In this section, I will explain what stereotypes are and show how language can reflect or even challenge stereotypes through different examples. Stereotypes are general beliefs or assumptions about a group of people. These beliefs are often based on gender, age, race, occupation, or culture. Although stereotypes are common in society, they are not always true because every individual has different abilities, personalities, and experiences. For this reason, we should be careful not to judge people only based on such stereotypes. Sorry. Next, let's look at the characteristics of stereotypes. Stereotypes are usually simplify people into one category and ignore individual differences. They are learned through society, family, education, and the media. Because stereotypes are repeated so often, they can influence the way people think, communicate, and treat others. In many cases, stereotypes may also lead to prejudice and discrimination. Now, let's look at the theory related to this topic. According to Janet Holmes in an introduction to social linguistics, language reflects society beliefs and values. The word people choose often reveals stereotypes about gender, occupation, age, and other social groups. Therefore, language can reinforce stereotypes if people use it without being aware of its social impact. This theory helps us understand why stereotypes are often found in everyday communication. Okay, now let's look at the first example. The always hashtag like a girl campaign challenges the stereotypes that girls are weak or less capable than boys. Instead, the campaign encourages girls to be confident and shows that doing something like a girl can mean being strong, talented, and successful. This campaign also changes the negative meaning of the phrase like a girl into something positive. Overall, this example shows that language can influence people's attitudes towards genders and even help reduce stereotypes. The second example is the song Boys Don't Cry by The Cure. The title reflects a common stereotypes that a man should not show sadness or emotion. Although it is only a song title, it represents a widely recognized social beliefs about masculinity. This example shows that language can reflect exciting stereotypes and influence people's expectations about how men should behave. Now let's compare these two examples. The Always Like a Girl campaign challenges stereotypes about girls by encouraging confidence and gender equality. On the other hand, Boys Don't Cry reflects traditional stereotypes that boys should hide their emotion. Even though the messages are different, both examples show that language influences the way people think about gender. One challenges stereotypes while the other reflects stereotypes that already exist in society. To conclude this topic, stereotypes are often expressed through language and media. The Like a Girl campaign encourages people to challenge gender stereotypes while Boys Don't Cry reflects traditional expectation about masculinity. These examples show that language has a great social power. It can reinforce stereotypes, but it can also challenge them and encourage positive change. Therefore, using respectful and inclusive language can help create a more equal and understanding society. Let's begin with the first case. In the first case, the manager says every employee must submit his report before Friday, and a good programmer should improve his coding skills regularly. These sentences use the pronoun his to refer to all employees, including women. This is called gender exclusive speech because it assumes that male terms can represent everyone. As a result, women may feel excluded, and the languages reinforce the idea that men are the default employees. According to Janet Holmes, language reflects society's beliefs and values. If we continue using gender exclusive language, stereotypes can be stronger. Research by Sensney and colleges also found that gender inclusive language reduces stereotypes and promotes equality. Therefore, a better alternative is to say every employee must submit their report before Friday. This sentence is more inclusive and respectful. The second case compares two lectures. Lectures A say language is a system of communication. Lecture B explain the same idea using a longer and more academic sentence. These examples show linguistic density, which refers to how much information is included in one sentence. The second sentence contains more information and is more suitable for academic writing, but it is also more difficult for beginners to understand. The advantage of dense language is that it is more detailed and precise. However, it is also harder to understand because it requires more background knowledge. According to Wardow and Fuller, language should always match the audience and the purpose of communication. Therefore, dense language is appropriate in academic writing, while simpler language is better for everyday communication. The third case is about linguistic complexity. Versions A say student must submit the form by Friday, but version B expresses the same idea using a much longer sentence with a more complex grammar. Although both sentences have the same meaning, version B is more difficult to understand because it contains longer clauses and more complicated sentence structures. Complex language is useful in formal or academic writing because it provides more detailed information. However, it may confuse readers who are unfamiliar with the topic. For this reason, speakers and writers should choose a level of complexity that is appropriate for their audience. The fourth case discusses language style. The first messages say, "Hey prof, what's up? I need your signature ASAP." The second message say, "Good morning, professor. I would like to request your signature on my academic form. Thank you." Although both messages have the same purpose, the second messages is more appropriate because it uses a formal style suitable for academic communication. Using an appropriate language style shows respect and improves communication. According to Wardow and Fuller, people naturally change their language depending on the social situation. Janet Holmes also explained that language reflects a social relationship. Therefore, the second message is the better choice because it is polite and professional. The fifth case is about context. A student says, "This project is really sick." Some students think the sentence is negative, while others understand it as something excellent. This happens because the meaning depends on the context and on how the word is commonly used by the speaker. Understanding context helps people avoid misunderstanding. According to Wardow and Fuller, meaning depends on social context. G also explained that context influences how language is interpreted. Therefore, because, Therefore, before judging the meaning of a sentence, we should always consider the situation in which it is used. The sixth case discusses register. A doctor says the patient exhibits symptoms of hypertension. However, when speaking to the patient's family, the doctor say, your family member has high blood pressure. Although both sentences have a same meaning, the language changes according to the audience. This is an example of register. Using the correct register make communication clearer and more effective. According to Holiday, register is influenced by the situation and the participant. Therefore, professionals should adjust their language so that their audience can easily understand the meaning, the message, I mean. The final case discusses stereotypes. The statement says women are naturally better at communication while men are naturally better at leadership. This statement is a stereotype because it assumes people's abilities based only on gender instead of individual skills. Statements like this can create gender bias, encourage discrimination, and limit equal opportunity. According to Janet Holmes, language reflects a society, beliefs, and values. Research by Cesny and colleagues also shows that inclusive language helps reduce stereotypes. Therefore, we should avoid making assumptions about people based on gender and instead evaluate them as an individuals. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm Aziza. Wanna say goodbye.